The Kansas City Royals have completed yet another month of the 2019 campaign. July has come to an end, but before we head into the month of August, we must go over what has happened in the month of July. So, first things first, the record is 57-52, which is good enough for first place in the AL Central, because as I keep mentioning throughout these monthly recap videos, the AL Central is complete dog shit. Second place team, Detroit Tigers, they're 4 games back. Third place team, Minnesota Twins, they're 5 games back. They still have a chance to win the division, but nobody in this division has a chance to be in the wild card, so if anybody wants to be in the playoffs in this division, they have to actually win it. And now you'll see scrolling on the screen the All-Star rosters from the AL and the NL. We had Danny Duffy in the All-Star game, I believe Kelvin Herrera as well, and I believe those were our only 2 All-Stars, but before we get into the trade portion of this episode, because it is the July recap, we didn't make too many trades, mainly because we are in first place. I didn't feel like trading everybody since we are in first place, and it wouldn't be the most realistic thing to just have a complete fire sale and trade away everybody when we're in first place. So let's move on to the trades. The first one we did was probably the most significant one we did was we acquired relief pitcher Jeremy Jeffress from the Milwaukee Brewers in return for starting pitching prospect Jonathan Hernandez. Jeremy Jeffress, 31-year-old reliever. They weren't using him. He was in AAA. See potential. He is what he is. He's a decent reliever. Decent arm to have out of the pen. We've had relief issues this year, so I figured might as well try to get something in the bullpen to help us this year. But, you know, it's not the biggest thing because I'm not trying to win a World Series in the year 2019. And Jonathan Hernandez is a 22-year-old starting pitcher who I signed in the offseason. He's a real guy. He was with the Texas Rangers last year, actually had a start or 2 in the big leagues last year. I ended up signing him, thinking he could be a decent prospect for us. Instead, we give him to the Brewers in return for Jeffress. The other trade, the less significant one we made, was we acquired Gunnar Heidt. I'm assuming it's Heidt. Gunnar Heidt, third base, minor leaguer in AAA of the Toronto Blue Jays, in return for Billy Burns, who is a minor leaguer for us in AAA, an outfielder. Gunnar Heidt, 26 years old, not a highly touted prospect. He's a C potential guy. He's a decent bat, pretty good bat. He's got good plate discipline, and basically the plan with him is, if Miguel Andujar can't put things together at third base, Gunnar Heidt might be an option to put there next year or the year after that, or who knows. There's plenty of things that can happen. Cheslor Cuthbert we still have. I'm not sure if he'll be back next year, but Gunnar Heidt is a guy to have at that position to have depth there. And like I said, he does have plate discipline, so that is the big difference between him and Andujar, because Andujar pretty much swings at everything, doesn't really walk too much. Gunnar Heidt will walk, but Andujar is slightly better on defense. Neither of them are Gold Glove third basemen, but Gunnar Heidt is not as good on defense as Andujar is. And of course, Billy Burns is just a 29-year-old center fielder. He's got a B potential. He's a switch hitter, speedy center fielder, got a great reaction, can bunt, contact hitter, has great vision. He's a guy who could be like a 4th outfielder for the Blue Jays. Once again, it's just like a minor league trade, though. There's no real value to it, just kind of swapping minor leaguers. And then we also did something interesting. Since we did trade Billy Burns, I wanted to replace him in the outfield, and rather than trading for somebody, we just took a guy who we currently have in the infield in the minor leagues and put him in the outfield. That is Raul, or Alberto Mondesi, who doesn't really have a future for us at second base. He's still young. He's 23 years old, B potential. He's gotten worse at the plate somehow. If you look at his stats, or look at his attributes from his prospect profile, and then look at them now, they're pretty different. He can't hit now, even less than he could then. He couldn't hit then, but he's even worse now. He does have the skills to play center field. He's got great reaction. He's got a good arm. He's got good fielding. He's got good speed. So he can play center field. So I figured, hey, why not move him to center field, give him a different position to play in the organization, because he doesn't have a future at second base, especially now that we have Richard Rhodes, who is younger and better at that position, who is poised to take over for Whit Merrifield next year. Now moving on to how our players are performing throughout the season so far. Mike Moustakas, as we all know, is now injured. He's on the 60-day DL. That's really the reason why he wasn't traded. I probably would have traded him even though we are in first place if he wasn't injured, but he is, so I couldn't trade him. So Mike Moustakas still on the team. We'll have to figure out what to do with him in the offseason. But he did tear a finger ligament. He's on the 60-day DL. He will be back, so that's why we replaced him with who we replaced him with, as I'll get into next, because he does have an 8.8, or Moustakas before he went down had an 8.81 OPS and 16 home runs, and we did replace him with Cheslor Cuthbert, because Cuthbert is a guy who had options, decided to bring him up. I don't really look as Cuthbert as a guy who has a really bright future here. He's just kind of like a depth piece that we had, and I didn't want to waste an option for Miguel Andujar because he already has 2 of his 3 minor league options taken, so I didn't want to have him called up, and then once Moustakas gets back, I would have to send him down, or he'd be up for a September call-ups, and let's just say he doesn't start next year, I'd have to send him back down, and that'd be 3 out of 3 options, and then I wouldn't be able to ever send him back down if I wanted to without him going through waivers. I didn't want to go through that situation, so Andujar is still in Double-A. Plus, Andujar hasn't been playing pretty well in Double-A. He's hitting 622 OPS and 356 at-bats and only 3 home runs. So, Cheslor Cuthbert at third base instead of Andujar for the time being. Whit Merrifield's out there up in his trade value. He, like I said, last year he didn't do too well to start the year, but this year he's just been cruising through the year. Playing well all season long, a 782 OPS, 9 home runs, 13 stolen bases, just up on that trade value, and he will 1000% be getting traded in the offseason. Travis Jankowski is now the starting center fielder against right-handers, as he is a left-handed bat who can't really hit against lefties, but he can against righties. He's got a 782 OPS, or a 758 OPS, correction, with a 369 OBP, so he's able to get on base. He's doing his job, swiping 25 bags so far in the year, which is in the top 5 in the American League. So Jankowski, now the starting center fielder against righties for the time being, and then Craig Gentry, who is back from his injury, is now the starting center fielder against lefties because he's the right-handed bat, doesn't hit too well against righties this season, so we are, or doesn't hit too well, yeah, doesn't hit too well against righties this season, so we're just giving him the starts against lefties. And he hasn't been having the greatest year, 692 OPS, 329 OBP, definitely not what you like to see, definitely not what he did with Baltimore last year, which was the reason why I signed him, but what can you do? At least we've got Jankowski. And you may be asking yourself what happened to Khalil Lee. Well, he's down in AAA now, and he's got a 1,000 OPS in AAA and 51 at-bats so far. He'll be back up for September call-ups because he is on the 40-man roster, and then he could possibly be the starting center fielder for us next year. It depends on what happens in the offseason, but right now it is the plan to have him as the starting center fielder, but things could change in the offseason, but it's possible he could be next year's starting center fielder. Hunter Dozier has kind of slowed down his home run pace. He's only got 14. I believe he had like 12 like 2 months ago or something, so he's really slowed down that home run pace, but he's also slowed down the strikeout rate. He only struck out about like 10 times in the month of July, because I believe last month he had like 90-something strikeouts. This month he had like 104. So he only struck out about like 10 times in the month of July. You can like to see that he's not striking out as much, but you don't like to see that he's not hitting home runs, because his value as a player is to hit home runs. And he does have quite a good OPS at 746, so he is doing his job, he's slugging, he's just not hitting home runs. He's hitting a lot of doubles, apparently. And as far as your Tommy Joseph update, he is still hitting. He's up as the DH, 743 OPS, 10 home runs, and 212 at-bats so far. And he's really playing for the 2020 DH job. If he continues to play well, if he keeps raking throughout the big leagues, doing his job as the DH, then he'll probably be back as the DH next year. But he has Vince Falvey in AAA just staring down that job, wanting that job, because Vince Falvey is absolutely destroying AAA. AAA is no match for the first-year pro Vince Falvey. He's got a 1,000 OPS, to be specific, a 1,028 OPS with 20 home runs and 382 at-bats in AAA. So Falvey, he's coming for that DH job. It's just a matter of when Tommy Joseph is going to give up that job. Ramon Torres, he's proven that he is a fantastic fielder at shortstop. Definitely an old-school type of shortstop because he can't hit. A 637 OPS, he's just not doing well for us this year. He's got good contact and vision attributes. And he had a good start to the year. He hit well last year when he came up, but he's just not really doing it for us this year. He is the 9-hitter, though, so it's not the biggest deal if he's not the greatest bat, but I mean, it is definitely concerning that he's not hitting really at all. And then for your Salvador Perez update, once again, 1,000% being traded in the offseason. He's got a 610 OPS so far in the year. He does have 14 home runs, though, but like I said, doesn't really matter if you're not going to do it consistently or you're not going to drive in runs with it. 610 OPS, 14 home runs, you're not doing your job. You're not Joey Gallo, you're Salvador Perez. Obviously, we know that he has defensive potential, or he has the defensive attributes, and he's great defensively. And we didn't trade him at the deadline because Maybreeze Valoria is on the 60-day DL, which we went over last month. It wasn't a plan of mine to trade him at the trade deadline anyways, but Valoria being on the DL did make that like 1,000% not happening. It was like 99.9% not happening before, but it just solidified that it's not happening once Valoria went on the DL. But the plan is still for Valoria to be our starting catcher next season and Perez to be traded for something in the offseason. And even though Perez does have not the greatest offensive stats these past 2 seasons, I do feel like Perez is going to be able to get us something back pretty darn good in return for him. As far as some pitching on our team, Jesse Hahn has been quite surprising this year. He's got a 2.99 ERA, just barely sub-3 and 123.1 innings pitched. And he's a guy that I would just kind of want to have as a stopgap and probably not bring back next season. That was the plan for him heading into this year. But he's really proven himself. He had a good year last year, had an even better year this year. He's on pace to have the best WAR of his career, the best season of his career. So if he keeps pitching like this, he's probably going to be back in our rotation next year for Jesse Hahn. And then Tyson Ross is a guy who's probably not going to be back next year. He's not pitching the worst, 4.06 ERA. Not bad for a guy who's pretty much in his first full season since being injured a ton. But, I mean, I'm probably not going to bring him back because I either want to get a young guy in there or maybe a different stopgap. We'll see what happens in the offseason. And then as far as Adam Conley goes, he just wasn't performing well in the major league, so he's down in AAA right now. He hasn't pitched yet in AAA, but he is down there in AAA. And Jose Urania is up from AAA Omaha. He is now in the rotation for us, and he's pitched pretty well so far. Speaking of guys who have been sent down to AAA, Justin Grimm is another one. Really just didn't do it this year. Obviously, last year he was probably our best reliever aside from Kelvin Herrera. But Justin Grimm, the Grim Reaper, hasn't been the Grim Reaper this year. He is just not doing it. He had 34 Ks and 28 innings pitched. That's obviously a good strikeout to innings ratio, but he had 17 walks as well. Not a good walk ratio. Just walking too many people, not doing his job. He's done in AAA. I'd be surprised if we bring him back next year for 2020. He is a free agent in this upcoming class, so we'll see what happens, but I highly doubt he'll be back next season. Especially since improving that bullpen is going to be a huge priority for us heading into this offseason. And with that being said, that's going to wrap things up here for this edition of the Kansas City Royals franchise, the monthly recap of July as we are about to head into August. I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I'm saying goodbye.
With tears in my eyes, I begged you to stay. You said, hey man, I love you, but no fucking sure that we could find something for you to do on stage. Maybe shake a tambourine, or when I say